last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another edition of Dark Matters Radio. And of course, DMR is brought to you exclusively by KGRA Radio, your contact point to the paranormal. And I hope the next couple of hours will take your mind away from all the crap that we're dealing with right now. And boy, I'll tell you what, somebody really shoveled a load on us more than I'm afraid a lot of people are going to be willing to bear, but we're just going to have to see how that runs out. Tonight, we have a very special guest. We have a gentleman on that I personally did not know, but I was put in touch with him by our producer, Bill Skywatcher, and actually, tonight's guest has one heck of a story to tell. His name is Mr. Terry Lovelace. Terry is an attorney, a former military veteran, which incidentally, that's where seemingly a lot of his story might have begun with. He was a runner, and he noticed something strange with his legs as he would run a couple of miles. An area on his leg inexplicably would become numb, and at any rate, he ended up having some x-rays taken of it, and a very unusual, strange thing was discovered. And I'm going to let Terry tell that story. Terry, welcome to Dark Matters Radio. It's genuinely a pleasure to have you here. How are you doing?
I am terrific, and it's my pleasure to be here. And I have a story to tell, and it's true, and I'll tell it without embellishment, and I think it'll give us all something else to think about.
Well, okay. Now, look, the name of your book, which Terry wrote a book called The Incident at Devil's Den. Now, I am from originally the East Coast, and the only Devil's Den I had ever heard of was in the Gettysburg National Battlefield and Monument, where a tremendous battle took place during those 3 days of carnage in 1863. But I got to tell you, Terry, when I saw that this was the name of an area in Arkansas, I guess it's a national or a state park. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a state park. And when I wrote my book in 2017, the experience that I had down there was in 1977. While I was on active duty in the Air Force. But when I wrote my book, I did a little research, and I found that Devil's Den in Gettysburg. There's also a Devil's Den in Florida. And I was kind of curious, how do these places get the name Devil in them? Or Diablo, or some, kind of negative, evil connotation. I'm sure you're familiar with David Paulides and his books Missing 411.
Oh, yeah, sure.
His fourth volume in that series is called The Devil is in the Details, Missing 411. And he talks about inexplicable, unbelievable, crazy disappearances of people from parks, from all kinds of places with the name Devil in it. Devil's Lake, Devil's Glen, Devil's Ford, Devil's Rock. I mean, there's a long list, and you can look them up in the book. As a matter of fact, Devil's Den is in there. I've got a couple stories I could tell real quick about how dark this place is.
No, we're talking about the one in Arkansas. Is that correct?
We are. It's in the northwest corner of Arkansas, about 70 miles, I think, from Eureka Springs. On the east side of the main road is the Ozark National Forest. And then on the west side is Devil's Den State Park. And Devil's Den, when I did my research, I found a article with Devil's Den in it from the Pittsburgh Press, dated 1946. And it had the story of this little girl named Catherine Van Alst. And Catherine was 8 years old at the time, and her family was camping there. They were on their way from Pittsburgh to El Paso to visit relatives. And they parked their camper at the campsite at Devil's Den. And, she's got two little younger brothers, and the three of them are running around the camper. Mom's putting breakfast on the picnic table. And the two boys come around, and there's no Catherine. And Mom says, "Boys, where's your sister?" And they're like, "Well, she's right here." So Mom says, "Go find her right now." So they check the bathroom, they run around, they look around, they come back a few minutes later and say, "Mom, we can't find her." So they wake up Dad, and they start calling her name, and other campers get involved. And this is early morning. By noon, they still haven't found her, and the park rangers become involved. And what followed was a 7-day search involving thousands of people, covering thousands of acres. And it was to transition from a rescue to a recovery at the end of the 7th day. So 7 days and 6 nights have passed. It's the last day, and the University of Arkansas bust up a whole bunch of kids from the college to assist in the search. And this guy, in the article, they refer to him as Chadwick. I don't know if it's a first name or a last name, but Chadwick is searching an area of high ground, an area that had been searched before several times. And he's just calling out her name. And she comes out from underneath a little limestone outcropping and says, "Here I am." And he runs over and he picks her up, and he's amazed. This girl spent 6 nights, 7 days in the woods. There's no potable water anywhere around. There's nothing for her to drink. She's well hydrated. She hasn't lost an ounce of weight.
How old was she?
8 years old. Other than a few insect bites, her hair was clean, and she has no memory of how she got there. And when they found her, she was at an elevation of about 800 feet above the campsite. And she would have had to walk a zigzag trail with flip-flops on about 7-8 miles to get to the top of this thing.
And no idea whatsoever how she got there.
None. What struck me is, and you can look it up for yourself, it's in the Pittsburgh Press, 1946, Catherine Van Alst, V-A-N, and then capital A-L-S-T, 2 words. In the Pittsburgh Press article, the reporter interviewed Mom and said, "Well, what kind of shape is your daughter in?" And the quote is, "She's eerily calm." And, that just struck me as kind of odd. So that's the kind of place it is. And by the way, I tried to find out, I can get a list of disappearances from Devil's Den State Park. I had no luck at all doing that. That was a brick wall.
Yeah, that's something that Paulides, I've interviewed Paulides before, and that was something that he made very clear was the fact that trying to get information like that, Terry, from these state and these national parks is practically impossible. They just don't want to give the information up.
As soon as I asked the question, I could tell. I mean, it was like, hitting a nerve with a dental drill. I mean, the whole tone and tenor of our conversation changed. And the guy I was talking to, anyway, he was of no help. But I was going to say, when I was writing the book in 2017 and doing some research on Devil's Den, there was a news story about a guy, and this was August of 2017. A 32-year-old man named Rodney Letterman from Bartlesville, Oklahoma, is walking the Butterfield Trail, not far from where we were, with a buddy. And they're walking the trail, and he had asthma or something. And he sat down on the side of the trail, and it's all manicured. It's a nice trail. And he said, hey, he asked his friend, would you run back and get my inhaler from the truck? And they were about a quarter mile from the parking lot. I said, sure, no sweat. So he leaves Rodney there with his cell phone, and he runs back to the truck, gets his inhaler, runs back. When he comes back, there's no Rodney. All that's left is Rodney's cell phone sitting on the ground. And this guy's scratching his head because he knows Rodney needed this inhaler and wasn't in any shape to take a hike. So he gets park rangers involved. And what followed was August, September, and October, 3 months of intensive searching for Rodney Letterman, using multiple helicopters with FLIR, thousands of volunteers. They covered 2,500 acres, and not a sign, nothing from Rodney Letterman. And that's how it was when I wrote the book. Now, since I wrote the book and put it on Amazon in 2018, there was a development in March of 2019. In March of 2019, the top of Rodney's skull was found sitting on a log right off the Butterfield Trail, not far from where he went missing. And it was out, open and obvious. Anyone walking around would have seen it. And DNA testing came back positive. It was Rodney Letterman's skull, or the top thereof. So,
well, I am a former criminal investigator, Terry.
Yes.
And that's very interesting. I'm sure some extensive forensic testing was done on that skull segment. Now, tell me, do you know what any of the findings may have been? Was that bone that had been exposed to the elements for any length of time? Or, I mean, those are the kind of questions that, had I been conducting an investigation, I would have wanted to know right off the top of the game.
Sure. Yeah, back in my days as a prosecutor, I would have asked one of you guys to please get me a copy of the autopsy report and see what we could find out. And we know how to look at an investigation. We know what to look for and how to look. But I wasn't able to get a hold of an autopsy report. But the article in the Russellville newspaper said that the skull had no tissue on it, that it was just white bone and looked like it had been exposed to the elements. Now, I don't know how reliable that source was, but that's the only information that I could get my hands on.
Yeah, that's that's passingly strange.
Well, what else I did was I talked to two things. There are two Native American tribes who kind of lay claim to that area in Devil's Den, and I talked to a medicine woman near Eureka Springs, who's part of the Caddo. There's two tribes, Caddo or Caddo, I've heard it pronounced both ways, and the Kahino tribe. And she's a medicine woman. And I asked her, I said, can you share with me your people's opinion of Devil's Den? And she said, yes, I will. It's oral tradition. But she said, we don't camp there. We don't hunt or fish there. It's a place that we transit through only. And I thought that was interesting.
Well, that says a heck of a lot right there.
Well, then I went further, and I got my son graduated from Michigan State University. And I went to law school at Michigan. And got in contact with an anthropologist who put me in contact with a University of Missouri Columbia archaeologist who specialized in that Ozark region. And I told him, I said, I'm researching Devil's Den State Park. And he says, okay. He says, yeah, that's kind of peculiar. He says, we found Native American and even Neolithic artifacts, 8,000, 9,000 years old, stone tools, evidence of campsites, all around Devil's Den. But inside Devil's Den, not a stone, not a flake of flint, nothing. And I said, how common is that? He said, that's very unusual. So it's a beautiful place. It's absolutely a gorgeous place, but it has somewhat of a dark history.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it does. Well, okay, let's go back to your story now.
Yes.
When did you first go into the Air Force, Terry?
Right out of high school. I enlisted in 1973, and I signed up to be a medic and an EMT. And I went through training and was assigned to Whiteman Air Force Base. Whiteman Air Force Base is in western Missouri, east of Kansas City. And the base is still there, very much operative. Matter of fact, it's the home of the B-2 stealth bombers. That's where they reside. Back when I was there, it was a SAC base. Of course, SAC is no longer around. And we had a squadron of B-52s armed with nuclear weapons. And then there was a squadron of Minutemen II ICBMs scattered all over farmland, all out in there. It was a remote area back then. It's built up now, which is why in the 90s they yanked those missiles and moved them up to Montana or someplace. I went in 73, spent 6 years in. My enlistment ended in 1979. That's when I got out of the Air Force. And the event that happened to me, the big event, happened in 1977. And I was working in the emergency room. I worked nights in the emergency room with this, he was my best friend. I refer to him as Tobias. So Toby and I were co-workers and best of friends. I was 22, he was 23 at the time in 1977. And we're working nights. And one night he comes up and he says, hey man, I got an idea. Let's go camping. And I'm like, Toby, are you nuts, man? We're city kids. I'm from St. Louis City. You're from Flint, Michigan. What do we know about camping? And he says, hey man, it ain't rocket science. He says, he knew that I was into photography, and I had a brand new Yashica camera with a nice set of lenses, and both of us lived on the base. And unfortunately, when you live on a nuclear base, there's not a whole lot you can photograph. So, I was really itching to try out this camera. So he says, I found this perfect place for us to go. It's called Devil's Den State Park. It's a bit of a drive. It was about 6.5 hours. But it was a great place. It was a cool place. And June, this was in April, we had this discussion. And June came, we had a 4-day weekend. And
Did you guys have camping equipment? Did you have a tent? Did you have sleeping bags? What exactly was your setup?
Well, we were known as kind of the nerds of the squadron. Back before nerds was a word, I guess. And we kind of approached this like a couple of nerds. We made a list, and Tobias went to the base library to try to find books on camping. He found a 1958 a copy of a Boy Scout manual, and he's all excited, and he says, all right, this will tell us everything we need to know. And it's like, well, no, we won't be tying any nautical knots. We won't be snaring any rabbits. We won't be doing any taxidermy. I mean, it was just nothing. And, we were overthinking the whole thing, just overthinking it. So I said, I got an idea. Let's go to Kmart and buy a cheap tent, a couple of blow-up air mattresses, and swipe a couple of blankets from the hospital, some DEET, some suntan lotion, and have our wives pack us a cooler full of stuff, and let's just go. And that's what we did. And we drove, and on the way down, he kind of surprised me. He says, now, we're not going to stay in a campground. And I'm like, why are we not going to stay in the campground? It's got showers, electrical hookup. And he says, yeah, man, but listen, you might as well be staying in Kmart's parking lot. I mean, you're going to have people on either side of you. You're going to have kids and other undesirables running around, He says, let's be outdoorsmen. Let's find a place, a high ground where, because he liked to watch the night sky. He was an amateur astronomer. And we dodged the campgrounds, drove past the kiosk in the Park Ranger Center, found a paved road, took it as far as we could go, and it turned to a gravel road. Then it turned to a dirt road. And then we came to a chain across the road, a post on either side of the road, and a chain across it, and a pretty sternly worded sign that said, absolutely no admittance. And we thought, it must be a nature preserve or something. So I said, well, it looks like we're going to find another place. And Toby's like, no, wait a minute, man. And he hops out of my car. What he saw was they had taken the chain and looped it around and put a lock on it to make like a noose and just draped it over this post. So he walks over, picks up the chain off the post, drops it, it falls to the ground, chink, and we're in. And boy, we drove in and we felt like we were on top of the world. I got to tell you, we felt like Lewis and Clark or something. And our mistake was that we didn't put that chain back up. And I'll get to that eventually here. But we drove and we just tried to take every route we could to get us higher. And we finally found a road that took us up and up and up, a steep grade. And we crested this hill, and there's this big open meadow. And Don, it was just gorgeous. It was high ground. It gave us a beautiful view of the forest, 360 all the way around us. Nobody around for miles. Couldn't even see the campsite or any of the lights. It was secluded. And we just looked at each other and were like, yeah, man, this is it. This is the place. So we set up a tent. And, we did all the fun stuff you do when you're camping. You burn hot dogs and eat chips, do all that stuff. And I remember saying to my friend, I said, I kind of understand how people like this. This is kind of nice. The smell that we made a bonfire, the smell of the wood smoke and all. And it was. And it was getting on to evening. And we had finished our dinner and tossed our paper plates in the fire. And we're sitting back satisfied. And I'm tired, but I'm not sleepy. I'm a little worn out from the drive, but I'm not sleepy. I'm used to working a night shift anyway, so 9:00 p.m. is morning for me, and for him too, and for Toby too. So we're sitting around, we're just shooting the breeze and having a good time, and laughing it up. And then there's like a lull in our conversation, and it goes quiet. And I noticed. And this sounds so cliche, it almost embarrasses me to say it, but I say it because it's true. The sounds of the forest, the crickets, the tree frogs, all that stuff was so loud just 15 minutes earlier that we were having trouble talking to one another. Now, all of a sudden, it is quiet. And it's not only quiet, it's still. And, we had a nice breeze earlier. We lost our breeze. And I got to tell you, it kind of unnerved me. I mean, had I been by myself, I'd have been in my car and out of there. But I didn't want to look like oh, I'm scared. I went to the woods and got scared. I mean, I tried.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I've heard this, bit about things going quiet. It's nothing new. That it's happened to a lot of people when in similar circumstances. And that's when things got strange.
Strange how, Terry?
We saw some lights in the sky. My friend, well, actually Toby saw them first. And he was fixated on something over his left shoulder. And I'm about to ask him, hey, what are you looking at? And he says, hey, man, were those lights there before? And I'm like, what lights? What are you talking about, dude? And he points to the horizon. And sitting just above the horizon in this tight little triangle are 3 bright stars. And each one is about as luminescent as a North Star. So they're pretty bright. So, I mean, they looked like stars, but some about them looked artificial. They were too uniform.
Okay, now hold that thought right there, because we're at the break time, and I'm going to have everybody hanging on
Yeah.
to see what happens next. But, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, my guest, Mr. Terry Lovelace, who is an attorney, former assistant attorney general, an Air Force veteran, and we are discussing an extraordinarily unusual event that happened in his life in 1977. Now, we're going to be back. Stick around, and depending upon how the interview goes tonight, I'm going to check on opening up the phone lines later on in the show. So we'll be back.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app. Free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Ew, yuck. They're unhealthy and gross. Bugs, I hate bugs. We keep a clean home, but occasionally bugs show up. Well, I found something that is tougher than bugs. Orange Guard. From contact, it kills bugs. Plus, Orange Guard kills hidden bugs and keeps new bugs away for weeks. I know. I use Orange Guard. Plus, all of the ingredients of Orange Guard are on the FDA generally regarded as safe list. Orange Guard may be used around food, humans, and pets. It promotes a healthier planet, and here's a bonus. Orange Guard cleans where it's sprayed. Plus, it comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Orange Guard.
You can get Orange Guard at Ace Hardware. And listen, folks, Orange Guard is tougher than bugs, and it's safe to use. Go to orangeguard.com. That's orangeguard.com.
Hey, this check is wrong. I worked a holiday and 7 hours of overtime. Not getting paid correctly is a real pain. It could also hurt our boss if our company provides out-of-compliance checks. That's right, construction companies doing business with the government can get fined, or officials of the companies can go to jail if the checks aren't right. It's a law. The Davis-Bacon Act has 30 compliance issues for every check, but there is an easy way for construction companies to be in compliance. EMARS offers Compliant Client, a web-based system that finds and corrects all 30 of the possible out-of-compliance check issues. Users of Compliant Client report an 80% savings in time and money. Running a weekly payroll usually takes about 5 minutes. All 15,000 plus clients of EMARS have never had a legal compliance issue. Plus, they sleep better on check day. Contact EMARS at emarsinc.com or call 480-595-0466.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Mainstream media's most wanted. KGRARadio.com.
And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, with my guest this evening, Mr. Terry Lovelace. Terry, before we had to go to break, you were detailing you and your buddy's experience after you get done with your hot dogs, your potato chips. You're out in the middle of the woods, and the nature is making such a racket. You got to be yelling at each other, and suddenly it all shuts off. And you guys saw?
Yeah, we saw a triangle of lights. We saw 3 lights forming a perfect little triangle.
Did you notice how I did that, Terry? Huh? That was pretty good.
That was a pretty good segue. And we could tell that these things, they were too high off the horizon to have been like a parking lot or a train or something. And we thought, well, if it's a plane, we didn't know of any planes that had, that kind of light configuration. But if it were a plane and flying directly in our direction, it might give the illusion for a few minutes that it's standing still. So we're watching the thing and it doesn't move. It's just stationary. So we're talking about, well, what is this thing? And then about 10 minutes into the conversation, the thing moves. And at first it rotates and it turns like it's on an axis. It turns about 3/4 around, and we're just awestruck. We're pretty excited. But what was odd is we weren't afraid. Throughout this whole first part of this thing, we didn't have any fear at all. And we're watching this thing. After it does its turn, it starts to ascend. It goes straight up. And it turns so that the apex, the point of the triangle, is pointed up. So it's headed up and it's climbing. And, it's difficult. We don't have anything perspective-wise to tell how big it is. But we could see it was a beautiful, clear night. And there were like just a trillion stars outside. So we could see that it was one object and not 3 objects independent, working choreographed some way, because the interior of the triangle was jet black, and the sky, even the night sky around it, was blue, dark blue. And we noticed that after it climbed to it seemed like it hit a ceiling. I don't know how high, but pretty high, because it got smaller, and then it started to descend. And as it descended, it was pretty obvious it was coming in our direction. And this thing, as it's descending, is tumbling. It's turning over and over.
Okay, let me ask you a question. Now, you were Air Force, right?
Yes.
And of course, the Air Force were the people detailed with taking care of the UFO problem going back to the late 1940s. Now, did you yourself have much familiarity with the idea of unidentified flying objects? Did you ever read any books on them? Did you ever talk to your buddies about them? Anything like that?
No. I had an experience, too, actually, when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I saw a flying saucer in my backyard, 1963. I was 8 years old. And it wasn't a long sighting, but I saw a flying saucer, and
just saw it.
I saw it. It was in my backyard.
That was all there was to it, just sighting.
Yeah, just a sighting. But there was one thing unusual about it, and that I was loading a bow and arrow. I was playing with a bow and arrow, so I was looking down at the ground while I'm loading this arrow into the notch of the bowstring, and I saw this perfect round shadow move over my feet, and I looked up, and there was this silver disc, and it was beautiful. It was like took my breath away, and it was just beautiful in the way like a new Alfa Romero would be on a showroom floor. It was just, it was just cool. It really was. And I was awestruck by this thing. But the only thing I noticed other than the sighting was I had a weird audio sensation. And that was that, I lived in kind of a loud neighborhood. I mean, there were women out talking, hanging up laundry, kids running around, dogs and cats and cars. And when I first saw this thing, the sounds went muffled. It felt like I'd put my hands over my ears and pressed them real close to my head. And that just lasted a few seconds while I'm watching this thing, and then it just shoots off. And nobody else saw it, So, and again, I saw one for the briefest of moments out my window when I was 11. So I considered myself to be an expert on UFOs. UFOs were flying saucers, right? And so I had no idea what this thing might be. And I'm thinking to myself, well, this isn't a flying saucer. Maybe this is one of ours. I just didn't know. And we had never, the only time during my tenure in the Air Force that UFOs were ever discussed, and it was in hushed tones. There was an incident in 1975 where there was an object over a launch control facility, and we witnessed that. And then there was a lot of buzz.
Where was that? Where was that at?
At Whiteman Air Force Base, at what was called, I call it my book Kilo 5. It was one of the launch facilities out in the middle of nowhere. Right. Some guy's soybean field, about 18 miles from the base or something.
So how did you hear about that? Because Barry Greenwood and Larry Fawcett wrote the definitive book on military encounters, with a lot dealing with base overflights where nuclear weapons were housed. And that's something, it's my understanding, Terry, that scared hell out of the military and the government. How did you find out about it? Did you actually witness this?
I did. And I can tell you that, by the way, Robert Hastings is a good friend of mine. He mentions me in his latest book, Confessions, where he talks about his experience as an abductee. And that's news. That's the first time he went public with that. But anyway, back to the UFOs. It was common talk because I was a medic. I drove an ambulance, so we knew the cops pretty well. Because if we went to any kind of accident or a car accident or something, the security police were always there. And
along with the civilian authorities?
No, usually not. I mean, the town was called Knobnoster, Missouri, and he had one sheriff and one deputy, and they didn't interfere with us in any way. So one night, about 2:00 in the morning, we got a call that a missile mechanic was working on a nuclear missile on a Minuteman II ICBM and had fallen, and they needed an ambulance. And it was kind of odd because we didn't get a full report. Normally we get a report like, we think he broke his leg, he's conscious, he's doing okay, but this was real scant on details. So we, did what we do. We hopped in the ambulance and drove out there. And we were about a half a mile, and it was a bitterly cold night. It was either zero or close. And as we're driving, we're about a half a mile from the site, and there's a roadblock. There's a blue security police car sitting across the road. And I pulled up to the guy. I'm sure he was supposed to be outside the car, but, I mean, it was cold, right? So he rolls his window down, and I'm like, hey, man, what's up at Kilo 5? He says, boy, beats me. I don't know, but something's going on. So I said, okay. And he backed the car up and let us pass. And we pulled up, and I'll never forget, there was this lieutenant standing there with a walkie-talkie in his hand. And when I rolled up in the ambulance, he said, park it over there. Your man's walking and talking. He's doing fine. But nobody goes in or comes out until I give the okay. And I'm like, yes, sir. I thought that was kind of unnecessarily, harsh. But, we pulled the ambulance around, facing in the opposite direction. And the whole place is weird because there are about a dozen security police cars, and they've all got these red and orange overhead lights flashing. And it's so cold that there's this fog out. So those lights mix with the fog, and the whole place has this eerie orange glow to it, which was spooky in and of itself. And, we're sitting there, and the windows inside the ambulance are frosting over. And my buddy says, I'm going to go out and have a look-see. And like, hey, man, this guy tells us, he's an officer, he tells us to stay in the ambulance. And Toby says, yeah, and that's the way he was. He was impulsive. And he puts on a parka and hops out of the ambulance. And about 4 minutes later, he comes back, he yanks my door open, and he's pulling me out by my shoulder. And he's saying, man, you have got to see this. You ain't never seen nothing like this. And he's pulling me, and I grab my parka, and I go outside. And I think I called him lieutenant. He was actually a captain. And the captain's standing right there. And I'm thinking we're going to get chewed out for getting out of the ambulance.
Now, I have a reason for asking this. This is 75, right?
April of 75.
Okay.
No, January of 75. The photograph I took of Kilo 5 was taken in April. This happened in January of 75.
Okay.
Because I have a picture of Kilo 5 in the back of the book, the missile facility. So the captain's standing there. And, it was kind of weird. It was kind of like he put rank aside for a minute. And he's looking at something in the sky. And Toby is looking at something. And I'm looking. And then I see it. And it looked like it was matte black in color. And it was almost diamond shaped. Kind of like that thing at Rendlesham. And it was about the size of a full-size van. And it was parked in the sky 50 feet over the blue dome where the ICBM comes out. And it was just sitting there. And it was absolutely still. And, your mind plays tricks on you. I'm like, well, I'm looking for wires or something because it just looks out of place. It's so improbable. And we watched this for a minute or two, and the thing just shoots off. And it's gone. It's over the horizon. And the captain turns around at me and smiles, and I smile back at him, and we were like, man, did you see that? And so anyway, he let us go in. We got our patient. We drove him back to the hospital. This poor guy fell and broke his ankle. And they have a little trapezoid-shaped building with an elevator that'll take you down to the bottom of the missile. And the captain had sat this poor guy in a chair with his foot up on a trash can. And he knew something was going on, but he couldn't see a thing because he couldn't get out of there. So he's like, what did I miss? What did I miss? All he wanted to know is what we saw. We told him what we saw. Now we were, it really never crossed our minds that was extraterrestrial. It really didn't. And
what did you think it was?
Well, we thought it was either USAF or CCCP. Our hospital commander called us as soon as I got back. We got back and it was early morning, and the hospital commander was already there in uniform. And he says, as soon as we got our ambulance restocked, we came in, and I got my report in my hand, and he says, "Come on into my office." And he was a good guy. He really was. He was a good guy. And he says, "Can I see your report?" I said, "Sure." And he went over to the copy machine. He made a copy of my report, and he kept the original and gave me a copy to file. But he had taken a black magic marker, and he had redacted the times. The time we left, the time we got back, the time we arrived on scene. All of the relevant times had been redacted. And I didn't understand that. I don't understand that to this day. And that's when he said, "Boys, I got to tell you something. That's a prototype helicopter. And it's secret, you understand? So there's no talking about it. It's ours." And I said, "Man, that thing's pretty cool." I didn't see blows.
You had to know, Terry. You had to know that was BS, right?
Well, I had doubts, but when he told us this guy was a terrible liar. I mean, he might as well have winked at us. So we initially thought, yeah, this has got to be one of ours. Squadron commander tells us, yeah, it's one of ours.
Now, the reason I ask you for the date, and you said it was January of 75.
Yes.
Well, actually, two things. Number one, did you ever hear that there were any problems with the launch package in that silo?
No, that I never heard.
Okay.
And that may have been covered up. We were enlisted, and we were out of that channel of, although we were pretty well connected to the rumor mill. And the rumor mill, among the security police guys, was that there was an orange glowing UFO that would fly around the bunker where they kept the nukes. And this would happen a couple times a year. And sometimes it would shoot like a laser down at the bunker and then shoot off. Now, that's the story that was told. I can't, that's hearsay. I never saw that.
Okay. Now, the second thing, do you believe now, after all these years, there was any connection between your presence there where this incident happened in 75 and later you and your buddies' encounter out in the forest?
I've thought about that over the years. I don't think so. I think they were two separate incidents. Although there was, and I have to tell the story for it to make sense, I have every reason to believe that they knew what we saw. They meaning the command structure at Whiteman Air Force Base knew what we had seen when we got back. That's why I said, we made the mistake of not putting our chain back up. And I should finish my story about the UFO rolling in, because where I left off was it was tumbling through the air and getting bigger, and obviously headed in our direction. But I recall thinking this thing is moving with purpose. I mean, it's an odd thought, I know, but I remember it. I remember thinking that it's not out of control. It's under control. And I don't know. But I did notice something strange, and that was I felt this sense of calm wash over me. And I would almost call it sedation. There's hardly a word spoken between us. Since this thing took off and went up in the air, we kind of quit our conversation and just had our whole focus on watching this thing. And it traveled a bit, and I felt a second wave of that sedation wash over me, and I felt tired, sleepy. And I shouldn't have been sleepy. I deserved to be tired. I drove all day, but I shouldn't have been sleepy. And this thing got bigger and bigger. And as it descended, we could see this black shadow move across the floor of the forest below us, because there was that much ambient light from the stars. And this thing was immense. It was huge. It was the size of a Walmart. I mean, it was just gigantic. In my book, I describe it as a city block in length on each leg of the triangle. and about 5 stories tall. And I think that's very accurate.
Damn, that's fair sized.
Yes. You know, there's a guy named Marler who wrote the definitive book on triangles. And that same year, in his book, I can't remember the title of the book, he talks about a woman who was on Highway 70 driving in the direction of Kansas City, not far from Whiteman Air Force Base. And she saw a 5-story tall triangular shaped UFO. And then there was another sighting in the Hudson Valley that same year. So I don't know if it was the same one or sister ships or what, but this thing evidently got around. And it finally came to a halt. We had set up our camp on the side of the tree line. And this thing just filled the whole meadow over the top of us. And it stopped, and it was about 3,000 feet in the air. And it came to a halt. And from underneath the triangle, all we could see was black, because the points of the triangle still had a little bit of light on them. From the center of this triangle, there came a white light. And I mean, man, it came on like somebody flipped a switch. It was just there. And it was a white light. It was, you know how like a searchlight cutting through fog, you can see a visible beam of light?
Yeah, sure.
That's what this was like. It was like a 6-inch wide column of white light. And it came from the direct underneath center of this thing. And it landed in the middle of our campfire. And it stayed there for, I don't know, maybe a minute. And then it clicks off like someone hit a switch.
Did you have any time problems? Any, seemingly losing a sense of what was happening around you? And then suddenly you were, so to speak, back or anything along those lines, Terry?
Not at this point. I felt sedated, and my mood was inappropriate. I can tell you I had the feeling more like an observer than a participant in all of this. I know that sounds odd, but...
No, I understand what you mean perfectly, sure.
And it was almost even a mild disinterest, kind of like, look at that. And that tired feeling. So as soon as this white light kicked off, there came a laser beam. Now, it's 1977. I had only seen lasers on television. So I saw this bluish purple laser beam come from the center and underneath of this craft, and it would land in one spot for 1/10 of a second and then vanish and reappear in another spot, and it would dance around. So it'd be in 10 different locations in the span of a second. It was just dancing all around our campsite. And this light, it struck me in the chest a couple times. I never felt a thing. It hit our tent, it hit our car. And I remember thinking, this thing's scanning us. I think the words I thought was, it's checking us out. And I think it was. And that lasted for probably 3 minutes. That lasted a little bit longer than the white light. And then that shuts off, and the two of us are sitting there, laying on these air mattresses, and we're dead silent. And this thing's 3,000 feet over our heads. And my buddy Toby says, show's over. And he picks up his air mattress, and he goes toward the tent. He throws it in the tent, and he falls on top of it. And all I wanted to do was sleep. I just wanted to go to sleep. And I picked up my air mattress, and I walked over. I didn't take off my boots, which is significant in a way later I'll get to. But I didn't take off my boots, my shirt, nothing. I threw my air mattress in, fell on top of it, and...
Well, the implication at this point is that something apparently began to take control of you.
Oh, no question. We were definitely under some type of control. because that's just not appropriate behavior, you know. This thing the size of Walmart parks over your head. I mean, and no, it was somehow controlling us. And I think it had control of us from almost the time when we first saw it. Because it wasn't too far up in the sky before I felt that feeling of calm wash over me. And I have no doubt that feeling of calm that I felt came from that thing. So I flopped down on my air mattress and I'm out. Now, the best that we can figure, 4.5 hours pass. And I wake up to these bright lights. They're orange and green, yellow, white, and they're brilliant flashes of light. And they're just coming at odd intervals. They're not on, they're not synchronized in any way. And these lights are so bright that whenever they flash, they light up that tent. I mean, like a ballpark at night. I mean, you could read for an instant anyway. And I'm out of it. I don't have my wits about me. And I'm thinking, these lights, this must be like the overhead lights of a park ranger's truck here to kick us out of the place. And then I sit up and I realize that I'm in pain. I have a lot of joint pain. And then I looked down at my feet. My boots are undone. And I thought, I didn't do that. And I took my boot off and my sock is on sideways. Now, you were in the Army. You know how they teach us to take care of our feet. I do that today.
Well, I hate to do it, but I'm going to ask for your indulgence again because, Terry, believe it or not, my friend, we are at the top of the hour.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, my very special guest, Mr. Terry Lovelace. Terry is recounting an extraordinary event that happened to he and his friend back in 1977. And when we get back after the top of the hour, we're going to continue on. And then I will check to see how we're doing time-wise. And we, who knows, just might get to those phones. This is Dark Matters Radio. My name is Don Ecker. I am your host. And all of it, every last scintilla, is being brought to you courtesy of KGRA Radio, your contact point to the paranormal. Stick around, we'll be back.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied, but you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. and purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Okay, nurse, let's get this man to the ER stat.
Right away, doctor.
We see this every day. Heart attack or angina pain due to blocked and clogged arteries. Chelation can remove obstructions or blockages from arteries and help avoid painful and expensive surgery. Now there's Angioprim. It's a liquid oral chelation product that you take with juice. You start to feel the results fast. Angioprim increases blood flow all over the body, and that means more energy and strength to take on the day with less aches and pains. 60 years of research has gone into chelation, and Angioprim is the result. A safe and easy way to unblock your veins and arteries from buildup that slow circulation.
Paging Dr. Jones. Please report to the emergency room right away.
Log on now to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com. Or to speak with a trained consultant. Give Angioprim a call at 954-882-7221. That's 954-882-7221. 882-7221.
Every 2 seconds, someone needs blood. Whether it's a natural disaster or one single child suffering from illness, the American Red Cross stands ready to supply blood when it's most needed. But blood is a perishable product. Therefore, it must continuously be replenished. You can safely donate blood every 56 days. The need is constant and patients are waiting. Call your American Red Cross at 1-800-GIVE-LIFE to schedule your life-saving appointment. Please give blood today. Patients are depending on you.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRARadio.com.
And we are back with my guest, Mr. Terry Lovelace. Terry, I'm sorry about having to cut you off, but do you want to pick it up from that point forward?
Yeah, I know right where I left off.
So your sock was on sideways, your shoes undone.
Yeah, I was wearing my combat boots. They were undone. They were unlaced. And I thought, boy, I don't remember doing that. And, I certainly wouldn't have put my socks on sideways. And I pulled my socks off. I put everything right, and these lights are flashing. And I get my boots tied up. And I'm still a little bit in a fog. And after I get my boots done, I glance over and I see my buddy Toby is on his knees, and he's looking out the window, not the window, but the flap of the tent, in the front of the tent that faces the metal. And he is fixated on something. And I spoke up, I'm like, Toby, what is it, man? Is it park rangers? What's out there? And he's like, shh, be quiet. So now I'm interested. Now I'm starting to get my wits about me. And I get to my knees, and I go to my flap on the right side of the tent, and I peel it back about 1.5 inches, and I look out, and the thing that I first see is that thing the size of Walmart that was 3,000 feet over our heads when we went to bed has now descended, and it's just about 30 feet over our heads. And it was intimidating, and it was immense. Thankfully, we weren't underneath it. We were just off to the side. And the next thing I noticed was I saw these kids. And there's like 12 or 15 kids paired up in groups of 2s and 3s. And they're all walking around this meadow. And I turned to Toby and I said, Toby, man, what the hell are these kids doing out here? We're in the middle of nowhere. It's the middle of the night. And and I could see during the flashes, one of these flashes of light, there are tear tracks down the side of his face. And that, boom, that sight popped me back into reality. All that calm, all that sedation, man, that stuff was out the window. I was scared. I really was. I was terrified. And I couldn't imagine what would move this man to cry. And he says, Terry, man, those ain't no little kids. They're not human beings, Terry. Look at them. They took us and they hurt us. Don't you remember? And I've never had a clear linear memory of everything that happened that night. All I have is bits and flashes and, pieces of nightmares. And what I call intrusive thoughts, what I was told is flashbacks. I'll be doing something completely unrelated, working in a yard or something, and then suddenly, boom, an image will pop into my head. I have no control over it whatsoever. So anyway, I go back and I look at these things again, and he's right. They're not human beings. They're 3.5 feet tall. They have large heads. And it was odd. They all walked with this really peculiar gait. And it was like their knees were bending the wrong way or something, or like they had sore feet, but they had a very distinctive gait. They didn't walk like you or I would walk. And I watched them, and it's not like they're looking at the ground or searching for anything. They're looking around, just kind of checking out the scenery, and they look in our direction, and, we're just holding our breath, hoping that these things don't decide to come over and confront us. And a light came on, another light from the center of the ship. There came a column of white light again, that same quality that beam of light that landed in our campfire had, that visible white light quality. And it's about 25 feet in diameter, and it's circular. And these little guys, in pairs and in threes, would walk into that light and just dissolve and disappear. And we watched this and we're amazed. We watched this until the last two little guys went in and then dissolved and disappeared. And as soon as they were gone, the light shut off, and the lights on the tips, the points of the triangle that had been multicolored, have shifted, and now they're all white. And it's not making any noise at this point. There's no sounds of the forest. It's dead silent. And while we're watching, we see this thing take off. And it doesn't shoot off like a rocket. It lifted off about like a hot air balloon. And
so at this point, you yourself have no clear memory of anything, but your buddy Toby does. How much of what occurred did he recall?
I don't know, but I had memory. I didn't have a clear linear memory of everything. I certainly didn't have enough memory to account for 4.5 hours. But I can tell you what I experienced inside that thing. Now, I don't know how they got us inside that thing. I do recall like a twirling sensation, and I recall a flash of light. But I don't recall what happened afterward. But I recall, the next thing that I recall was I was standing inside this triangle. And this thing was, and this is hard to grasp, I know, it doesn't make sense. This thing was bigger on the inside than it was on the outside. I mean, from the outside, it was the size of a Walmart. In the inside, it was the size of a football stadium. And I don't know to this day, did they take us someplace else? Or is that some trick of physics that they can do? But this thing was absolutely immense. Everything in it was white and stainless steel. I saw 3 flying saucers. I know that sounds nuts. Lined up neatly. I mean, like planes under a carrier deck, lined up in a neat row. And there were the little gray guys who were running all over the place. But I mean, they were moving with purpose. They were working, doing tasks of some kind. And I have a theory about those things. I don't think those things are like living sentient beings like you and I are. I think they're more like little robots or something. I think there may be some kind of combination of artificial intelligence and nanotechnology, quantum computing, who knows, some biomaterial, but I don't think they're alive in the sense that you and I are. I think they're like worker bees, there to do tasks. I recall that I was standing there and they had taken our clothes off, and I had all of my clothes and my boots in my hands. And I was aware that my friend Toby was standing next to me. And I'm absolutely frozen. I can't move a muscle except for my eyes. My eyes are darting all over the place, and I'm trying to drink in as much of this place that I'm in as I can, because it's just simply unbelievable. And it's insanely brightly lit. I mean, it's like they got 500-watt bulbs in all their lamps or something. And And that was another thing. I never saw a light fixture per se. It was just like light came out of the walls or something. But it was very, very bright inside of that. And I remember standing there looking at this, and I saw a guy who was walking kind of with an air of authority. I mean, you can kind of tell when a guy's, when someone's in charge, you can tell it from their mannerisms, the way they carry themselves. This guy was about 6 foot tall, and he was pinkish, chalkish white in color, in skin tone. And he wore a gray garment of some kind, like a one-piece fitted gray garment. And he had no ears, no hair to speak of, just 2 holes for nostrils, no nose, and a slit for a mouth. And his eyes were big, but they weren't exaggerated huge like you see in the motion pictures. These are like a pair of wraparound Ray-Bans, about that size. And he's looking around and walking around with, like I said, with purpose. Obviously, the guy in charge. I'm straining my eyes to the left as far as I can to look at him. And just by happenstance, this thing turns its head, and we locked eyes. And that was the scariest thing that happened to me in the whole ship. There were a couple things that happened, but that was the most frightening. And I'll tell you why. It was as soon as we locked eyes, this guy was in my head, and I knew he was in my head. And he knew me, and he knew my wife, he knew my secrets, he knew my plans, he knew everything about me. And all I could see, this guy is just raw intellect. And, the best example I can give is, I have a dog, and she'll come over and put her head in my lap, and I pet her on top of the head, and she looks up at me with those big brown eyes, and with trust, and she knows that I'm the alpha. She knows I'm the one in charge. And in this equation, I felt like I was the dog. I felt like I was the dog. And I heard a woman screaming, and she sounded like she was in pain. And then I became aware that Toby was no longer standing next to me. And then I heard him scream, oh my God, no, 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 and then scream. And then I didn't see him again. And then some of these little guys came, and I was on some kind of motorized walkway. I was moving, but I wasn't walking. It was like I had roller skates on, but I didn't. And they just rolled me down the hall. And we went down a hallway. And in my book, I talk about there's some aquariums to my right that are on the side of the wall made of glass with pink fluid in them. And we get inside this room, and we're in a big white domed room. And they put me on this table, and I'm still stiff as a board. And they're doing something to my lower back. And there's this insect-looking thing, this praying mantis-looking thing that looks to be like 7 feet tall. Now, in my memory and in my nightmares, I picture this thing wearing a white lab coat. I don't think he wore a white lab coat. I think that's something either they put in my mind or my mind supplied to try to make it more palatable or something. But I'm screaming because he's hurting me. And I'm filling my lungs with air. And even though I'm on my back, I can tell my chest is rising. And I'm screaming as loud as I can, and I can't hear a thing. Well, evidently I am screaming because I annoy Dr. Bug here, who has this triangular shaped head with the 2 big bulbous eyes. And it turns its head in my direction and looks at me with its left eye. And I heard in my head, in the middle of my head, I heard with crystal clarity, why are you screaming? Stop screaming. You know we take you back. You know we don't hurt you. Now stop screaming. And he hit me on the top of the head with this just big green digit finger thing, and I was out. and I was out, and that was it. Those are the memories that I have of being in the ship. Like I say, not much, but that's all I got. And that's been the subject of nightmares for 40 years. So they dumped us out. We landed near the car, and I remember thinking somebody screwed up. They should put us back in the tent. And sure enough, I had no more than thought that. Then there were 4 of these little gray guys. They dragged us into the tent and just kind of threw us in the tent. And then I was unconscious again. And I was out of it until I woke up with the lights flashing. And that pretty much runs the full circle of what happened. And when we saw this thing, like I say, we watched it take off like a hot air balloon, just lift off. All I could think of was I wanted out of there. I wanted to put as much distance as I could between this park. I mean, I wanted to go. But, and this is going to sound odd, but I was afraid to go outside. I mean, all I had was a piece of canvas over my head, but I felt like it gave me cover, and I didn't want to leave that security. And to this day, I'm afraid to walk across an wide open space, especially alone. I won't do it. I'll walk a mile out of my way and go around rather than cut across an open field. So we're sitting there. My friend's hyperventilating, and finally he gets control of his breathing. And I guess it's about a half an hour later, and he says, "Man, we got to go." And he says, "Just grab your keys and let's dart for the car and let's get the hell out of here." And I'm like, okay. And that's what we did. And we ran to the car, and I'm like, "Toby, man, this is middle of the night. Are you sure you can help navigate me out of here?" And he said yes. And he did have an unerring sense of direction. I mean, when we worked, I always drove the ambulance, and he always gave the directions because he was good at it. So he got us out of there without breaking an axle. And we drove across. I recognized the chain. I could see it laying in the road. And we should have stopped and put that chain back up. Because when we left our campsite, we left our tent, we left Toby's backpack with his name and address, phone number in it. We left our cooler. We left everything. I took my car keys and my wallet, and he took a flashlight. And that's all. And we got in the car, and like I said, we made it back to Blacktop and felt so relieved, and turned the car north and just started driving. And I remember thinking, man, I have never been so thirsty in all my life. And I became aware that we were hurt. We had been burned. I had like the worst case of sunburn without blistering. I never blistered, but my skin was beet red all over. And when I say all over, I mean all over. I mean, the soles of my feet, under my arms, I mean, everywhere I was burned. And I didn't understand that. I wore a cap, and my scalp surely shouldn't have been sunburned. And I had thick hair at the time. It was short, but I had hair up there. I shouldn't have been sunburned on top of my head, and I didn't understand that. And finally we got back to base. But two things. One was the incredible thirst. I think we were dehydrated from being burned, and I had never in my life been so thirsty. And the second thing was something had changed. Something between us was different. We didn't talk. We didn't talk about it. Two people go through something like this, and I think human nature is you get together and you debrief, and there was no debriefing. We didn't talk to one another. And I don't know if I was still under their control or not, but I didn't want to talk to him. And he's curled up in a fetal position on the bench seat of my old Chevy. And whatever they did to me, they gave him a double dose because he was really hurting. And like I said, there was very few words said the whole drive back. We didn't discuss it. We didn't talk about it. I got back on base. Like I said, we lived in base housing. I dropped him off at his house, And I think all I said was, see ya. And I drove 3 blocks down the road and pulled into my driveway. Walked in, and my wife's like, oh, you're back early. And she's like, oh, what happened to you? And I'm like, I don't know, but what do we got to drink? And I'm just pounding glasses of lemonade. And she helped me get my boots off. And she says, boy, you should have used some suntan, but how'd you get burned? And I said, I don't know how I got burned. And she feels my forehead, and she says, man, you got a fever. She took my fever. I had a fever of 103. So she said, you know you got to go to the hospital. And I said, yeah, I know. And that's kind of awkward because, we worked at the hospital. But, the hospital, medical people take care of their own, So I knew that these were my friends, and they would treat me well. I also knew that I couldn't tell them I saw a UFO. I mean, we both understood that. That wasn't discussed, but we both knew that, if we did that, we'd have been in a psych ward, no question. It'd been the end of our military career. So I was admitted to the hospital. I spent 3 days and 2 nights in the hospital. I was admitted acutely ill by dehydration. They ran 2 IVs through me. And this is significant. On my last night in the hospital, and I was in my room by myself. By the way, when I got to the emergency room, the base commander and the hospital commander were there. They came into the exam room while the doctors were working on me. And then 2 guys in casual civilian clothes that I'd never seen before came in with them. And the hospital commander's the only one that spoke. And we had a pretty good relationship, but he was very, very formal, very business, very military. And he said, Sergeant Lovelace, you're to have no contact with Sergeant Tobias in any way, shape, or form. That means you won't speak to him, you won't call him, you won't attempt to contact him through any third party, you won't pass him notes, you won't give him anything, you won't accept anything he might give you. If you run into him in the base exchange, you'll immediately turn around and head in the opposite direction, and on and on and on, and then in a very stern voice, do you understand me? And I said, yes, sir. And of course, I didn't understand. It didn't make sense. So anyway, I'm alone in my hospital room. And in addition to the sunburn, my eyes were burned. I had what they call flash burns. It's what a welder would get if they didn't wear that hood. It's a sunburn to the cornea of your eyes. So my eyes, I had a lot of pain with my eyes. So they kept the lights off in the room. And this was the 3rd evening I was in the hospital. And the nurse is going to give me an injection. She walks in the room, and these 2 guys in business suits, blue business suits, walked in behind her. And, I could tell these guys were cops. I mean, they were law enforcement. You could just tell, they had a swagger about them. They had their suit coats were unbuttoned, and you could see a shoulder holster. And they pulled out ID and flashed ID. One of the guys was about 50, short, with like a flat top haircut, and he was in charge. And the other guy was in his 30s, and he was a captain. And they walked in and they showed me their ID. And
civilian cops?
No, absolutely not. The one was a major, one was a captain. They were Air Force. Okay. They were Air Force security police. They showed me their badge, and it said Office of Special Investigations. They were OSI. And OSI is to the Air Force what NCIS is to the Navy. I don't know what you call it in the Army, but they're the investigative branch. CID. Yeah, that's it. And that's what these guys were. And they, the captain cranked up my bed. It wasn't electric. It was a crank bed, so that I'm sitting in an upright position. And they took everything off my tray table and laid some forms in front of me to sign. And I'm scared. I'm scared to death. I'm 22 years old. I was a pretty straight kid. I'd never been in trouble a day in my life. And I thought, oh my God, what did we do? We burned the forest down or something? And I spoke up and I said, sir, am I in some kind of trouble? And he smiles and he looks at the captain and they both laugh. And he's got this Louisiana accent. You know, he kind of talks sideways, kind of like Calvin Parker, you know, the accent that Calvin Parker has. He says, son, would we be here if you weren't in trouble? And I thought, oh my God. And he says, what happened was park rangers found that chain down. So they drove into the whatever it was, a nature preserve or something. It's still there. It's federal land. It's not part of Devil's Den State Park. It's federal land owned by the Bureau of Land Management. And the rangers, park rangers, found our tent, our cooler. They found Toby's backpack with his contact information on it. And the rangers called the airbase, talked to the commanding officer, and said, "Hey, 2 of your airmen are doing something down here. It looks like they got a campsite set up, and they're going to come back, or they're planning on coming back." And because we left everything. So this guy starts asking me, he reads me my rights under the UCMJ first, you know, and I don't understand a word of it, really. And he put some forms out in front of me, and I said, "Sir, what are these?" And he says, "Son, these are waiver and consent forms." He said, "They give us the right to take a look in your house and a look in your car. You wouldn't mind if we did that, would you? Or do you have something you have to hide? Do you have a big old bag of marijuana in your house? Is that what this is all about?" And I'm like, "No, sir." And he says, "Well, it's up to you, but we just want to look around. If you got nothing to hide, sign them." So I did. I signed all 6 forms. And the problem was, because of this flash burn to my eyes, I couldn't read a word of it. And I didn't read a word of it. So he scooped these consents up, put them in his briefcase, and then he started interrogating me. And, you know, having worked with law enforcement over the years, now I recognize the techniques he was using, but back then I had no idea. And he said, "You know, you boys must have yourselves a little marijuana plot down there. Is that what this is all about?" And that really scared me, because 1977, you know, if you were growing marijuana on a piece of federal land while you're active duty Air Force or active duty anything, you know, you're going to be in big trouble. So that scares me. And because I thought, you know, what if just by chance somebody is growing a patch of marijuana down there? They can hang it on me or us. And I'm like, "No, sir, no, sir, no, sir. We were," and he says, "Well, why did you leave your campsite?" And I said, "Sir, we went to bed. We weren't feeling well. We woke up sick as dogs. And I felt so bad. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to come to the hospital because I got these sunburns, and I just felt terrible." And he says, "Oh, that's what happened, huh? You 2 boys woke up and you felt bad and you drove back here. That's what happened?" And I said, "Yes, sir, that's the truth." And this interrogation went on, and the whole object of the exercise was to intimidate me, and he did intimidate me, no doubt. And when he was done, the captain packs up and leaves, and he shuts the door behind him. And the head of my bed is near the wall, near the door. I'm in a private room, and he puts his hand on the door, and he bends down next to my face, and he kind of drops this tough guy affect, you know, this tough guy face, and kind of looks like a 50-year-old guy. And he says, "Son, I know, and you know, you 2 knuckleheads stumbled onto something out there, and I think you know what I mean." And I didn't answer him. And he said, "Oh, I'm sure you know what I mean." And he says, "All I want to know is, where's your camera, and how many pictures did you take of it?" And I said, "Sir, And you know what? It's odd. I was an amateur photographer at the time. Like I said, I had this Yashica camera. I had a little dark room set up. I developed black and white prints. The thought of taking a picture of this thing never crossed my mind. Can you believe that? But that's true.
Yeah, I do.
Absolutely never crossed my mind. And I said, sir, I never took any pictures at all of anything. And then he turns the tough guy look on again and says, I don't believe you. And then he left. And a few weeks pass. Some other things happen, but I'm going to cut to the chase. A few weeks pass. They get my buddy. My buddy is PCS out to Japan at like light speed. He's gone. I did see him one last time before he moved to Japan. In violation of the no contact order, I stopped by his house. My wife and I were on our way back from the grocery store, and I ran up to the front door. My wife is like, don't do this. You're violating an order. You know, don't mess with these OSI people. I'm like, look, and I really didn't want anything to do with the guy, but I felt like I owed him goodbye, you know. We'd worked together, we barbecued, played cards, been good friends for, you know, a few years, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. And I ran up to the house and walked through the front door, same door I'd walked through 100 times before, and there's a truck, they're packing. And I walk in, and his wife passes me in the hall and says, with a hard look, you're not supposed to be here. And I said, I know, I just wanted to say goodbye to you guys and wish Toby luck. And Toby must have heard this exchange because he walks around the corner. And this poor guy is a train wreck. I mean, whatever they did to me, they did the double portion to him, like I said. He was always very, very concerned about his appearance. Very neat, you know, always well-dressed, always well-groomed. And he was barefoot, he was dirty. I mean, I know he was moving, but even for that, it was out of character for him to look like the way he looked. And he walked up to me, and I walked up to him, and I thought it would be appropriate. I was going to hug the guy, and I didn't. And we did this awkward handshake exchange. And he was a short guy. I'm a little over 6 foot. He's maybe, 6 inches shorter or something. And we're standing, he's right in front of me. And he says, it happened, didn't it, Terry? And I said, yes, my brother, it happened. You're not losing your mind. And he said, why? And I said, man, I don't know. I don't know why. It just did. And I looked down at my shoes. I said, I just want to wish you the best. And I could smell vodka on his breath or some kind of liquor, which was really out of character for him. He maybe at a barbecue drink a beer, can and a half of beer, but he wasn't a drinker. And his eyes were bloodshot. And that was the end of our conversation. I ran back and got in the car and went home. And that was the last I saw of him. Well, let me go back. Well,
let me ask you one question.
Yes.
And this came from one of our KGRA chat room users. Did you, during the course of this incident, smell anything resembling sulfur?
No. I've been asked that. I've been asked sulfur, and I've also been asked if I smelled almonds. And I don't recall any kind of sensation with smells.
Okay. All right.
So, anyway, I say goodbye to my friend. We go back home. A few weeks pass, and I get a call from the squadron commander who calls me up and calls me into his office and says, the OSI is sending a car over for you. They want to see you at OSI headquarters. They should be pulling up out front right about now. If I were you, I wouldn't keep them waiting. And I said, yes, sir. And I ran out of the office and down the hallway. Thankfully, I stopped and used the John. because I wouldn't get an opportunity to for quite a while. And ran out the front door, checked my appearance, made sure I looked okay. And sure enough, this blue car is pulled up right there. And I got, you can see my name tag. The guy hops out of the car, and says, you Sergeant Lovelace? I said, yes. And he says, opens the back door for me, have a seat, thank you. First and last time I'd been in the back of a police car. It was kind of an odd experience. And he drove me to OSI headquarters, which was just a couple miles away, maybe a mile and a half, I don't know, not far. And he opened the door and said, follow me. And we went through the 2 double locked doors where they do the buzz thing, and then you hear a click and the door will open. And then you go into like a middle area, and when the door behind you clicks shut, then they buzz the next door, and then that opens, And I followed him, and he took me down a hallway, and there were obvious interrogation rooms set up on either side of this hall, and they were alphabetical in sequence, I believe, like A, B, C, D, E, and I was at the end of the hall on the right, and he took me down and opened the door and said, have a seat, someone will be with you shortly. Now this is 9 a.m. roughly. And I look around the room, which is, a little bit bigger than my bathroom. And I notice, it's just very Spartan, just that cheap tile and gray walls. And there's a framed mirror on the wall that's obviously a two-way affair. I mean, who's going to be grooming themselves in an interrogation room, And I wanted to go up and cup my hands around it and look and see if I could see anything, but I didn't have the nerve to. And there's this clunky old gray Korean War vintage desk sitting in the middle of the room with an old padded chair on rollers. And then in the corner, there were 3 of those molded fiberglass chairs, like they were, all over in the 60s. And a clock over the door, and that was it. That's all that was in there. And I pulled up the comfortable chair at the desk, and I'm sitting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting. And it's 10 o'clock, and it's 11 o'clock, and it's noon. And these 2 agents, the same 2 that came to see me at the hospital, the major and the captain, come walking in, and they're having they kind of ignore me. They're having a conversation between themselves about fishing, or it was either fishing or golf. But they're having a discussion and completely ignoring me, except to kick me out of the comfortable chair, make me take one of the fiberglass ones. And the major sits in the comfortable chair, and he says, well, we just might close your file today, Sergeant Lovelace. Would you like that? And I said, yes, sir, I would very much. I'd like to put this behind me, sir. And he says, well, I think we'll be able to do that. He says, you're going to be hypnotized today. And I said, no, sir, I didn't know. But I don't understand. Why? And I started to question him, and he didn't like that. And he went to his briefcase, and he pulled out a piece of paper. And then I remembered those pieces of paper I signed in the hospital. And he slams this piece of paper down on a table in front of me. And he says, is that not your signature, son? And I said, yes, sir, it is. But I don't understand why. And he says, well, all they're going to do, he's going to give you a little bit of medicine, and he's going to hypnotize you, and we're just going to go through what happened that night, and you might remember some things that you didn't tell us. We just want to make sure you're telling us the truth. And I said, sir, but I don't really want to. He says, well, if you don't want to, you don't have to. He said, I can tear these papers up right now, these consent forms. I can tear them up, toss them in the trash can. And he said, and then I'll just see you at the court-martial. And I thought, what the hell? I haven't been charged with a crime. I don't even know what I'm accused of, other than they think that I took pictures of, this giant UFO. And I thought, I'm going to roll with this. I mean, if I resist, I'm going to look guilty. At least that was my thought. I know differently today, and then also I thought, but I mean, it may not have turned out well had I revoked my consent. So because I didn't know what they had. I mean, I didn't know what they could have charged.
Well, you being a former assistant attorney general and being an attorney for how many years, you know they took a healthy shit all over your constitutional rights.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yep. That consent was signed under duress and was worthless. It goes on and on. But I knew this. I made my mind up. I was determined that I was going to resist this hypnosis. I knew I wouldn't have any control over the drug, but I wanted to resist the hypnosis. And there's a tap at the door, and they open the door, and this guy walks in, this big barrel-chested blonde guy with oak leaves. He's a major, and no name tag, which was unusual. And he walks in, and he's talking to the two agents, and they're either talking about golf or fishing. I forget which way it was. But they're chatting. They obviously are friends, or at least acquaintances. And they stop, and then this guy turns his attention to me, and he holds his hand out. He says, "Sergeant Lovelace, it's so nice to finally meet you." And I shook his hand, and I thought, this is odd behavior for a military officer. This guy carries himself more like a priest or a therapist or something, because I think he was a therapist probably. And he's got this like shaving kit under his arm. And he says, "Oh, I understand you're from St. Louis." I said, "Yes." And he starts rattling off some landmarks, and we're making conversation. He's smiling. And then he says, "Sergeant Lovelace, do you trust me?" And I thought, well, like hell. But I said, "Yes, sir, I trust you." And he says, "Well, then, for purposes of this little exercise today, would you call me Brad? That is my name." And I said, "Okay, yes, sir." He said, "Don't you mean yes, Brad?" And I said, "Yes, Brad." And he says, "And for purposes of today's little exercise, may I call you Terry? That is your name." And this guy just creeped me out. And I said, "Yes, you can call me Terry." And he says, "Well, I'm going to give you some medicine in your arm here. It's going to make you relax. And then you're going to go through a little minute exercise with me. It's important that you pay attention and follow my instructions. You're going to walk down a series of stairs. We're going to walk down into the basement. With each step that you take, feeling more relaxed, more comfortable." And he says, "There are 10 stairs. When you get to the bottom, we're going to ask you to turn on a light." And it kind of explains to me up front what was going to happen. And the drug that was used on me, I found out, because I'm not the only one to ever go through this, by the way, was sodium amytal, which is a short-acting hypnotic. It's a powerful drug, but it's not really long-lasting. But combined with hypnosis, it'll put you in a weird state, in a weird place. And he gave me the medicine in my arm.
Thank you, MK Ultra.
Oh,
because all that crap was developed after World War II.
Yeah. And I recall the captain whispered to the major, "I'm amazed every time I see this." And I thought, my God, what do? Do you guys do this to everybody that comes back late or sees a UFO or something? I mean, how many people do you do this to? Was the thought that crossed my mind. And he rolled up my sleeve and put a tourniquet on. This little shaving kit he opened up. He had a syringe all ready to go and a piece of rubber tubing and a Band-Aid. And he tied the rubber tubing around my arm. And he says, "All right." He says, "You got good veins." And I said, "Thank you very much." And he says, "A lot of people tell me that this is pleasant." And he gave me an injection. And it was like, bam. It was like, and it was pleasant. It was pleasant. It was like the sedation they give you before they give you the main anesthesia in a hospital if you're going to have major surgery of some kind. And he went through this progressive relaxation thing for the hypnosis. So he says, now, Terry, I want you to walk. We're going to take that first step down, feeling relaxed. And in my mind's eye, I'm going up the stairs while he's telling me to go down, you know? And I think, you know, I don't have any control over the drug, but I can resist giving this guy my full attention, my full mind. And I tried to cordon off a portion of my mind, and I played Beatle music and Rolling Stones and, you know, did multiplication problems and anything I could think of to keep my mind active, to know that I at least had some control over some part of my mind. And he asked me, we got down to the bottom of the stairs, and I heard the major ask in a whisper, is he out? And this guy, the hypnotist, Brad, says, oh yeah, he was gone by the count of 3. And I thought, you moron. And because I still had my wits about me. I mean, I was loopy from this drug, and I'm sitting there like in a, you know, relaxed posture. And he starts to ask me questions, and he says, now you and Toby took a little camping trip, is that right? And I said, yes, Brad. He says, my, that must have been exciting. And he said, and you saw some funny lights in the sky, didn't you? And I said, yes, Brad. And he said, who were they, Terry? And I said, they were the space people. And I was dumbfounded. I could not believe that came out of my mouth, because I went in there absolutely convinced I wasn't going to tell him anything about a UFO. And here I am spilling my guts. And I guess it's a function of the medicine. And maybe the hypnosis had more effect than I thought. But he asked me questions, and he wanted to know what I saw. And I told him what I remembered. The woman screaming, my socks being on sideways, all of it. I told him everything. And we got to a point where he says, now, Terry, I want to ask you, these 2 agents here, have you told them the truth about everything that's happened to you? And I said, well, yes, Brad. I've not lied to them. And he said, well, did you take any pictures of this thing? And I said, no, Brad, it never crossed my mind. And that was the truth. And, there was one thing that really struck a nerve with him. And I forgot to tell you about this. I didn't remember this independently, but this came out under the hypnosis. Under hypnosis, he's always asking me, Terry, tell me what you see. Don't tell me what you think. I want you to look in your mind's eye and tell me what you see. And I saw about 6 human beings. They were about our age, 19 to 20, young people. And they wore tan flight suits with what surely looked like military issue boots to me. They had military haircuts. One of them was a woman, a girl, Latino, kind of cute, really, short. And they had orange patches on their shoulders of their flight suits. And like I said, I've never seen these tan-colored flight suits before, and I'd never seen the orange patches before. And they were too far away for me to read the patch. And I wish I could, I'd love to know what those patches said. But they completely ignored us. They wouldn't even look in our direction. And I know the one guy, the one guy walked over to the wall and slid his hand across the wall like he was opening a panel or something, and was doing something on the side of the wall. From the angle, I couldn't tell what he was doing, but he was doing something.
Well, these were apparently crewmen on board this craft?
Yes.
Human.
They
appeared totally human.
Totally. Absolutely human. And they would not even look at us. And I heard, when I said this, I heard the major say, son of a bitch. And there's, I had my eyes closed. There's some shuffling of paper. And the hypnotist, Brad, says to me, he says, Terry, there were no other humans on the board that ship. That wasn't right. That's just your imagination. You were there by yourself. Well, there was no ship. And then he takes me through this whole long thing, and he says, you're going to forget that memory. I'm going to take that memory away from you. He says, that memory's a burden to you, and I'm going to take that burden from you. And I thought, like hell, I thought, I'm not going to let this guy steal these. These memories belong to me. I experienced this. I had to go through this. So, I own those memories. For better or worse. I mean, maybe my life had been better if I'd let him, take it all away. But, I don't think so.
It would have still been there.
Would have still been there.
It would have been.
It would have been there, and it probably would have surfaced in unhealthy ways, alcoholism or who knows what. I mean, it wouldn't have been healthy. It's healthier to know, I think. And when he was convinced, I didn't have any pictures of the thing. But obviously, they knew all about this UFO. I mean, they knew everything about this.
That kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Sure does.
How much they actually do know. And were they, in fact, those two guys, were they, in fact, AFOSI, or might they have been from another government agency? Because I've been doing this UFO investigation thing for a very long time. All right? A very long time. And I've always suspected there was a power player behind the scenes that could pass themselves off as anybody they wanted to be.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
There is an agency, a department, a group that has been dangling this ball for years and years. We are getting very close to the end of the show. Obviously, we're not going to be able to take any phone calls tonight. We've got, let's see. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes to get this closed up, Terry. It just, the time blew past. Do you have anything, like, for example, number one, please tell the audience where they can get your book, your website. Are you going to, well, no, obviously
Yes.
Right now with the virus, you're not going to be speaking anywhere.
No, I spoke at UFOCon in San Francisco in February, and got back to Dallas late February, and I'll tell you, I was glad to get home because I was nervous traveling. So yeah, it's no more conferences this year. But my book is Incident at Devil's Den, and it's on Amazon. I have a book that has pictures in the back and a drawing I made of the thing. And in addition to the book, there's a Kindle version that's cheap, just a couple bucks. And I did an audiobook, and I wanted to do an audiobook. So I did the whole book, and I did it in my own voice. They told me to use a voice artist. I'm like, no, this is my story. I'm going to tell my story. And I did. So there's an audiobook, and that's popular. So, if you're on house arrest like I am, and you got nothing else to do, read a book or listen to my story.
Did you ever try to get in touch years later with your buddy Toby?
Oh, that's a great story. It's a great question. I'm glad you asked. His wife and my wife were best of friends. A couple years, I got out of the Air Force in '79. A couple years later, I'm working in the law, and she calls my wife and says, because they had exchanged Christmas cards. We knew that she and Toby had divorced. And she left him, and he evidently did not fare well on his assignment in Japan and was discharged from the military. I tried to call him. I had his dad's phone number in Flint, Michigan, and I tried to call him. And I finally reached him, and I said, I'm trying to locate Toby. And he's like, Toby's not doing well. He's on the street. I can have him call you when I see him. And he knew who I was, and he took my number, but I never heard from him. I never heard from Toby. So a few years later, I'm working on a case with a guy, with an FBI agent. And I asked him, I said, hey, I'm trying to locate a buddy of mine that I was on active duty with. You think you could find him for me? He's like, sure, no sweat, man. He says, as long as he's not a fugitive, I can find him. And he says, give me all the information you got. I gave him everything on the guy, everything that I knew, wrote down. And 2 weeks pass, and he gives me a call and says, hey, meet me at the bar. I'll buy you a beer. I'm like, okay, sure. So I meet him at the bar. He says, I got bad news for you. Your buddy's dead. I'm like, what do you mean my buddy's dead? And he says, yeah, it was an auto accident. It's very unfortunate. I'm very sorry. And, now this wasn't an official investigation. This was a favor he did for me on the side. But he lied to me. This guy lied to me. And that just blows me away because I knew these guys to be, to have integrity. And that just blows my mind. And it makes me wonder, do I have a file tagged somewhere?
You obviously haven't been paying attention to the FBI roughly 3 or 3.5 years ago.
Well, that's true, too. So anyway, I found out when I went to write my book, I went looking for his obit. And I found it. And he was alive until September 7th, 2004. All these years, we could have got together and compared notes. But they didn't want that to happen.
Well, you know what, Terry? I would love to spend another hour talking to you. But, my friend, we are totally out of time. So let me do this. Let me extend another invitation to you to come back at some point in the not too far distant future. I want to thank you profusely. This has been a fascinating 2 hours. And with that being said, thank you, Terry. This story is fascinating. Ladies and gentlemen, you will discover that next weekend is, of course, Easter weekend. KGRA will probably be mostly doing best of. We will not be live next week, but good Lord willing, the river doesn't rise. In 2 weeks, we will be back with our full glory and show, Dark Matters Radio. And with that being said, have a fantastic weekend. Mr. Terry Lovelace, thank you so much.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to your awesome audience.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And with that being said, good night, gang, and we'll see you in 2.